His mantra was, "There is no tomorrow," which, if you've seen the movie Rocky II, that's how my next guest lived his life. Hung Lee is today's guest, who was born in the Netherlands to Chinese parents, and as a young boy, he grew up dreaming of becoming a zoologist, studying animals, understanding nature, making sense of the world around him. But he ultimately chose humanity over animals, and he ended up majoring in anthropology. And then he never worked a single day in the field. What followed was a journey that was anything but linear. Rejection after rejection in his job search, and then a serious car accident forced him to a year of recovery and isolation. But it was in that stillness that something shifted. Hung formulated a plan. He packed up, moved to London, one of the world's greatest cities, and he gave himself just 3 days to find a job. Here's what I love about Hung. He never had a plan B. And if plan A didn't work, he didn't fall back. He just built another plan A. And that mindset carried him through multiple failed businesses, through pivots and detours, until he landed on something that would quietly change an entire industry. Hung Lee will be the first to tell you that his path isn't something he'd recommend to anyone. But in the end, he found something deeply fulfilling. And today, he's living fully in the present, with no rigid map for what comes next. So without further ado, please enjoy Hung Lee and his clocking out journey. Hung, welcome to the podcast. It's great to see you.
Great to be here, Raymond. Thanks for inviting me along, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I am so delighted about our conversation today. For context, there's one word that I've just been obsessing over, and it's brain food. You have created this sort of platform that I believe centers around this word brain food. And I've been sitting with this word for the last few weeks in preparation for our conversation today. When I think about this word brain food, I think of the word intention and how people today consume content. And in the platform that you've created, you are using this word brain food. And from my perspective, it's all about curating content with intention that impacts how people live their life. And I think so many people today are consuming content, whether they're scrolling Instagram, social media, and they're absorbing it, but it's not sitting with them, and they're forgetting about it. And so I think that we need more brain food in the world.
No doubt about it. And now I started this project, which later became a business, really in an earlier era where there already was like too much noise out there on the internet. This is in that social media sort of Web 2.0 boom period where everyone was posting, everyone was blogging, everyone was doing everything. And I found myself in a position where I knew there was like great, nourishing, educational content out there. But it took me like 25 clicks to get there. You know, it was like you had to plow through a lot of horrible stuff to get that one piece of content that you thought, okay, this is actually useful and worth me clicking through this stuff. And I just started collecting, consistent sources that seem to always deliver that type of nourishment. Those authors, those publications that always seem to surprise me or give me sort of some food for thought. And it just occurred to me that, hey, listen, maybe I should just collect them together someplace. I just bookmark all of these sources that were consistently producing some great stuff. And before you know it, I had this great database of sources that I'd go to regularly and say, you know what, I'm getting real value here. I know I can go to this space. And I know I'm not going to waste my time. And then I guess the thought occurred to me that other people might have the same issue, everyone's swimming through the same internet. I've already built this database, was my thinking. How can I make it easy for other people to access? And I just thought, okay, let's just start a newsletter and just send it out. And, that would be my way to signpost to these great sources, and other people can get value from, the stuff I was already doing. It felt like, hey, I could help a bunch of people without doing a lot of work. And that's how the newsletter got started.
Wow. I love that. I love how that journey evolved and the curation of that content evolved, the food for thought, And we certainly will get to that point. I'm excited to kind of unpack how you've evolved to where you are today. But let's start from the beginning, Hung. Tell us, where are you from? Where did you grow up?
So I'm from like zillions of places. It's a difficult question for me to answer, Raymond, because I moved around a lot when I was a kid. So my family are Hong Kong Chinese. My grandfather moved to the Netherlands in the 1960s, and he brought his family over when they were like teenage kids. So my mother arrived in the Netherlands when she was 14 years old, and she basically spent her young adult life there. I was born in the Netherlands, and I'm technically still Dutch. I still have a Dutch passport. Although I left the Netherlands when I was 3, moved to Germany for 2 years, and then we moved to the UK. So England is where I guess I'm from, quote unquote, even though it's the third country I've lived in. I'm not a citizen of the country in which I live, but and it's hard for me to say, okay, what nationality are you? Because it's like, okay, technically I'm Dutch, but don't speak Dutch. And ethnically I'm Chinese, but I'm not Chinese national either. So, how do I explain that story succinctly? I can't. I guess I'm just one of these globalized kids that moved around in a period of time when it was kind of easier to move around and have got touch points with different cultures and different places.
Wow. So do you speak Chinese?
Yeah, I speak Cantonese. So the language of the home remains Cantonese. That's the language I speak with my parents and my family, and I speak English. So English is definitely my best language, so to say. But you can drop me in Hong Kong and I'm all right,
I love that. It's so interesting, though. Like when I think about your identity as a young lad growing up, the idea that you're UK, Netherlands, Chinese, as you've evolved, that just is so worldly. I feel like you can connect with people in so many cultures at so many levels that, provides great opportunity as such a young age to have been immersed in 3 very different cultures. I would imagine that you grew up a lot from that.
Yeah, it wasn't fun at the time, Raymond. I can tell you that. It's one of those things that I now, as an adult, can look back and say, look, I'm blessed to have that experience. But as a young kid, the only thing you're interested in is to belong and to not stand out, and not to be the subject of, because standing out is dangerous. When you're 5 years old in a schoolyard, you don't want to be standing out because that's the toughest place in the planet. So I experienced this type of sense of, okay, how do I belong? And I think this is actually quite common amongst people that are, I think the sociological term is third cultural kids. So people who may, belong somewhat in more than 1 or 2 cultures, but not fully in any of them. And it does teach you a few things. I mean, firstly, I think from a negative point of view, it can teach you rejection at a very early age. It could teach you otherness at a very early age, and it could kind of, I think the modern parlance is microaggressions. Like you experience what quote unquote called microaggressions quite a lot, like little reminders that you didn't fully belong to a place. And I think that can be potentially harmful because if you don't react well to that experience, you could then go off in the wrong direction. And you can see that with a lot of kids that end up being very angry, for instance, at the host country that they're in. They rebel against it because, the way to deal with rejection is to reject back harder. And you end up sort of doing or ending up on a road which I think is really quite destructive for everyone around. Or, you go down the other route, which is to say, actually it's the third route. The other route is to try and like belong even harder, which is even more sad, I think, because then you get folks that totally reject their ethnic identity, completely refuse to associate whatsoever with their background because they're so desperate to belong and not be another. And I think that's a shame too. But the third way, which is I think the toughest way, which is to kind of accept all sides of it, and kind of accept that, okay, you're not going to fully belong in any one place, but that's just the way it is. And what good can come from this? And as you mentioned, Raymond, one of the good good parts that I've learned in late teens and early adulthood was that actually you do get the chance to experience different cultures in a way that's different from someone who's kind of coming from a monoculture. You do get access, you do get perspective, and you do get sort of a sense of being able to study humanity a little bit more forensically. Because you've had to work out at a very early age, like, why don't I belong to this? Or why am I not invited to this thing? How come I've been called this? You go back and you don't realize you're being bullied because you're too young to understand what that is. You just go back home to your mom and say, why are the kids calling me this? And then the mom has to sit you down and give you some lessons. So yeah, no big sub story, nothing hugely traumatic happened in my childhood at all. I had a very happy childhood, but it did teach you a few lessons very early on about the nature of belonging, nature of tribalism, how you can rise above it, and how you can kind of live a life where you can treat everyone in the way in which they should be. Not forcing them into one group or another, but accepting them for who they are.
I love how you articulated that. What came to mind for me is when you talk about that word belonging, is how insecurity as a young kid, if you're not feeling that sense of belonging, how insecurity can pop up and surface, and then you ultimately are trying to find acceptance. And it's sort of like, if you don't get that acceptance, you must have had a really supportive family, though, in terms of having, like, you shared your mom sitting you down and having that conversation. I bet you grew up in a pretty supportive family.
Actually, I don't think so.
Really?
No, and I love my mother and I love my father, don't get me wrong, but they were pretty much classic Chinese immigrant family, you know what I mean? It was not like it's not like how parenting might be now, where you create safe spaces and you do all this. No, they were working in the restaurant, so they were working hard all the time, and pretty much they didn't really they didn't know any of this either, like they never, my parents actually stopped school really early on. Like they finished official schooling at the age of 40. So they didn't know what it was like to grow up as a young person or as a teenager or anything like that. It was totally new to them. We had to figure it out. We, meaning myself, my brother, and then I had a bunch of cousins that basically had the same journey, the same path. And we were kind of having to figure all this out ourselves. But no, I mean, the way in which you kind of resolve these issues, I think fundamentally it comes down to yourself. I mean, you end up having to, the biggest problems, the biggest challenges that you have in life, ultimately you got to make them on your own. I think I realized that at a pretty early age, and there was some somewhat obvious choices, It was like, okay, what do you do here exactly? Do you continue to strive to belong to a bunch of people that ultimately, don't think you do? Or do you think, okay, fair enough, these guys don't want me to fully be there. That's all right. Let's not hate those folks. I'm sure they've got a reason for that. And let's just get on with your day, get on with your life, and see how else you can make your life in a different way. And I'm really thankful I made that choice. I don't think I was particularly strong or wise or brave or anything like that. Probably fortuitous more than anything else. Could have easily made the other choice and just reacted badly. I'm sure a lot of the kids that have problems today just make that wrong choice, as a roll of the dice. I count my blessings that didn't happen for me, and gone down a different path.
That's great. So you're a young kid, you're navigating this identity. Your parents are working the family restaurant. When you were young, what did you dream about? Like when you thought about your life and what you would be when you grew up, what did that look like?
I probably wanted to be a zoologist. Basically, I was like totally into nature. I still am. I love the natural world. And David Attenborough is a very famous guy here in the UK, probably globally, as a naturalist and TV presenter. Happy birthday, David, by the way. I think he's like 100 years this year. But he was great because he basically was a great popularizer of the natural world. And I was so addicted to his documentaries. And I guess I wanted to be David Attenborough. I wanted to be a person that would go ahead and, spend their life outside of the office, going around and, trying to dig up newts or something like that. That was generally what I wanted to do as a young child. But I didn't go down that path in the end. It came down to biology. I think we had to make decisions as to which courses I took and so on. And biology was a no-go from an academic achievement point of view for me. And it was like, okay, I got to take a different type of path that would try and get me through this education process. And ended up doing a different sort of academic path, which took me away from the possible professional angle working with nature.
Wow. Did your parents have an influence over what you ultimately did in terms of, they were restaurant owners, and did they have sort of a vision of what you would be and influence what your decision was?
No. Again, this may sound strange, and it may not be the sort of a response people might expect. But the truth is, they were still in the restaurant working hard. The expectation was, okay, go to university, figure it out from there. Their job was to put food on the table. My job was to succeed academically and then just move through it. So I didn't receive much guidance from them. Again, they didn't know. These are people that finished education themselves at a very early age, never went in the sort of corporate world. They kind of worked purely within that ethnic culture that they were in. And it was up to us. I guess second generation, you got to just find your own way. And in the end, I didn't have a huge idea what it is I wanted to do. Zoology didn't happen. I chose the next best thing was, okay, let's study humanity instead. And I ended up choosing things like psychology, sociology, anthropology. Ended up majoring in anthropology at university. And there was a time where I thought, okay, what I will do is basically become a student of human culture and see whether I can parlay that into something that was a career path. But in the end, after you do academia over a period of time, you become, I became a little bit disillusioned with it, with the discipline itself. I felt that there was some sort of difficult methodological issues with just the idea of studying humans, some ethical challenges as well, which I couldn't quite resolve. And in the end, probably, towards the third year of my university, I was okay. I'm not going to be an anthropologist. I got to figure out something after I graduate. And so yeah, I abandoned the academic side pretty much at that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not surprising, and I appreciate you sharing the reality of what you experienced as a young kid and the support that you were getting and this idea that you had to figure things out. When you are in that scenario where you're just sort of, you are figuring it out, you're having to make decisions, they're not necessarily all leading to what you intended to do. I would imagine looking back, you sort of like that journey impacted the things that you're doing today in such a positive way. So it's sort of like you lived these early childhood experiences that ultimately set you up for later success. It's almost like foundational.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think all of us, if we go back and just recall some of the key moments, like epiphanies you had as a young person, these things are hugely informative of your life, and yeah, it's so important to just make the right decisions at those times, like the mental decisions, pick up the right lessons rather than the wrong, because inevitably these epiphanies come at like high stress moments. They inevitably come when there's an unusual situation that's caused you to have to think about it, and how do you resolve? And like I say, that can go left or right. But yeah, thankfully it went so far. It seems the correct way for me. And yeah, the requirement to try and figure things out by yourself, I think that's always been pretty inherent simply because it was never provided for. There was never like, oh, here's the thing, just do that. You had to figure it out.
So you sort of got your degree, but after college, you didn't go into anthropology. You chose a completely different career.
Right. And so it probably wasn't so much a choice, by the way. So it's a little bit of a sidebar story. But after I graduated from university, it was the classic, okay, this guy has spent 4 years studying this university course. He no longer wants to pursue professionally. What the heck does he do now? You know, it's like, oh no, I had no clue whatsoever. Apply to any and everything as you do, because you're just like, okay, give me some, I need some sort of in somewhere. And got rejected, which really surprised me, because by that time in my life, I'd actually been reasonably successful academically. So, you know, it's truth be told, sort of from I would say around 10 years onwards, year 10 onwards, academically, I was quite talented. So I was able to just generally succeed academically. So I didn't encounter rejection much. You know, it was just basically passing exams, applying to college, getting to the college you want. All, you know, everything was going smooth. The biggest sort of no's I was receiving was when I was actually emerged from the academic world and then started applying to jobs and started getting all these rejections. And it was like, oh, wow, well, you know, what the heck is all this? I don't know how to deal with it. And that was demoralizing. So it was a lesson for me now is to understand that actually, and now, of course, having worked in recruiting for 25 years, I know that a lot of these rejections have got very little to do with the personal quality of the people you're rejecting. It's just how the machine works. But at the time, I didn't know anything about this and really took those rejections personally as a verdict on my capability, as a verdict on my worth. And I remember going down to quite a low ebb, actually, having spent too long trying to apply for work. And yeah, those are the things that associated with it. A very quick 60-second sub story, but I got involved in a car crash. No one died, you know, not a serious issue, but basically I was the most banged up guy in the entire thing. And that basically resulted in me spending about 18 months convalescing. So I had like several breaks of my leg. And it was one of those where, okay, you got to be in and out of hospital because various operations trying to put this thing, back together. And that period of time gave me plenty to convalesce and to think through about where I am, what I was thinking needing to do. This sense of, okay, you can't just sit there and wait for a job to happen. You've got to make it happen. And after, a period of time where you are in forced isolation, you literally can't get out of your room because you can't move. You have a lot of thinking time, and you emerge from that really with some clarity and some determination. So the clarity was, okay, you can't sit there and remotely apply for jobs because everyone's rejecting you for reasons unknown. I was academically still quite successful, but what I didn't have was work experience of any value to people. And the application wasn't working, so you got to do something different. You got to relocate immediately to a bigger city. The bigger city is where I came to London, and just try and find it from there. So your starting ground was wrong. The starting position was wrong. Go to a big city where there's more density of opportunities, which I know now. I didn't know the language then, but I had an instinct that simply a bigger city will have just more people, therefore more things might happen. And then just try and get a job, any job, and then just start from there. So
Hung, I love that story, and I appreciate you sharing the story of the accident and how you had over this year period in almost isolation to just sit with yourself. And it's almost like what came to mind visually for me was that people meditate, and when you're sitting in silence and you're sort of breathing, you really start to uncover ideas and get clarity. And the fact that you had this year-long period of time with yourself almost forced you into sitting in silence and really thinking about like your life and how you would ultimately determine what the starting point was going to be. And that's such a great life lesson, because I think people oftentimes are so much on the go, and you just almost have to force yourself to stop and really think about, like, what are your values? What are your interests? What's important? And then from there, you were probably so ready to go. You know, you had this plan and you were like, I'm ready. I need to be able to execute on it.
Bro, listen, Raymond, by the time it was like a coiled spring. You know, you're like a coiled spring. I remember going down to London and I thought, you know what, I'm going to make it. I don't care what it takes. My determination was just through the roof. There was just no way I was going to fail. It was just going to happen, because I had experienced what it looked like not happening, which was this, demoralizing period where basically you the only kind of external interaction you had with anybody else was basically people rejecting you for a job. And I think there's only so many. It taught me a lot about morale, like how quickly your morale can be damaged. Making sure that your self-esteem isn't attached to other people's sort of opinions or these externalities you can't control. Because at that time when I was applying for these jobs and getting no's, it was getting to the point where my world was shrinking. It was already very small because I was like, not able to walk properly. But I remember my reaction to rejection was to lower my expectations. And I kept on going lower and lower until such a point where I realized, you know what, you're applying for jobs that you were qualified to do when you were like 16. Like, what are you doing applying for these basic clerical jobs when very clearly you've academically superseded this? Going lower is not the option here. What I realize now, and I kind of vaguely understood then because it was just instinct rather than strategy. But what I understand now is that the issue was not necessarily my application; it was simply opportunity. Where I was living simply had low opportunity, still does, unfortunately. Especially for the type of job that I was looking to do, which is your classic graduate, middle class, on your way, white collar job. And I needed to get to a bigger city to do that. That was the first thing I needed to do. And in the end, I just thought, okay, let's just get down to London. Let's just cobble together enough money to rent a place for like 3 days. And that's all I had. It was like 3 days worth of rent. And I thought, okay, at the end of these 3 days rent, I have to have a job. I have to have a job offer because I couldn't afford it, right? There's another issue that you couldn't afford to do the train travel. Back then, there was no Zoom. So if you want to do an interview, you had to physically attend the interview. Well, if you're unemployed, taking a train is going to be like 2 weeks worth of your benefits. You can't casually do that. So I thought, right, you've got 3 days to get a job. And that kind of is another lesson for me, really. Sometimes you need to set yourself a time deadline to get stuff done in order to kind of create the urgency. Because if you have an infinite deadline or something you can just push back constantly, and typically nothing gets achieved because there's always tomorrow, right? Or you think there's tomorrow. I'm reminded of that clip in Rocky 2. I don't know whether you've seen the clip, Ray.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember when Apollo's training Rocky to fight Mr. T? And Rocky just, for some reason, not up for it. And he says, yeah, tomorrow. And Apollo says, there is no tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Brilliant scene. And this is it. There is no tomorrow, bro. You gotta get on with it.
Wow. I love the timeline of the 3 days in London. And that is such a short period of time, and the pressure to have to find that job. Oh my gosh.
Yep. But it just got you the energy, and that energy sort of transfers, I think, to the communications you have. I mean, I hope it didn't sound or appear desperate, but the determination, I think, does come across. And there's certain jobs where determination is actually a look-for characteristic. And recruitment definitely is one of those things that you can't do that job of recruiting, which, you know, at that time as a recruitment agent, meaning third-party recruiter, pretty much is a sales job. You can't do anything that's a sales job if you don't have like that determination to go through it. So yeah, I think the deadline caused the urgency. The urgency created the need to be determined, and basically that was probably the thing that got me the first job.
I love that. So Hung, you're starting this new career in recruiting. When was the moment that you decided recruiting, like working as a recruiting consultant, wasn't the career for you? Was there sort of a defining moment that you had an aha that said, this isn't the career that I'm called to be? Was it an evolution? Did it evolve over time? Were there signals?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember there was actually a very precise moment, Ray. And this is not like one of these dramatic career, reinvention, existential identity type of scenarios. Because I still work in recruiting, but
right.
Doing the job of a recruitment agent, I knew that was over when I remember. And I was working, by the way, as a recruiter in London in the early 2010s and stuff like this. So everyone's drinking loads. It was party city. Being hungover on the job was just a normal thing. and Raymond, let me tell you, I was hungover on this job on this day. And I remember having a screening call with this candidate.
Right.
And this candidate was, and I knew how to do my job so well. At that time, I was able to ask him questions such that I knew we should prompt a long response, and then I would take that long response as an opportunity to have a micro nap. And I did that through the call. It's a disgraceful example. I'm ashamed of it to this day, but yes, it was kind of funny in a certain degree. But I was able to conduct this screening call literally with 1% of my mental energy. Into this call and completed the screening call, and I put the phone down, and I had a moment of triumph, Ray, where I thought, you know what, I'm so good at this job, I don't even need to be conscious in order to do it. I remember even saying this to myself. And then the thing just dropped on me like a ton of bricks, Ray, because I realized, you know what, you've just totally disrespected this candidate. You've absolutely disrespected this candidate because he is looking for a job. You were congratulating yourself on how smart you were to be able to asking these questions in order for you to have your nap. So you disrespected this candidate. You disrespected your job. You disrespected the profession that you've chosen because that's not how you do your job. That's not how you're a professional. And you disrespected yourself. Like, what are you doing? And I couldn't get over that moment, Ray. And I actually resigned the same day. It didn't occur to me to leave my job until I had that conversation, that pathetic moment of triumph, and then that sense of remorse over it. And then the realization that, okay, what's happened here is that you've gone to a point where literally you don't care for this job anymore. You don't respect this job anymore. And the longer you stay in this job, the more corrosive it's going to be for you and everyone around you. And I was a top performer, by the way. I had my best year ever the year before. I was a very liked person in the company I was in. Everyone was shocked when I resigned. And I resigned that day with no plan. I just knew I couldn't do that screening call again. Sober, hungover, or otherwise. I realized I could not do that again. And it was like, okay, it's over for me at this point. I need to figure something else out. And yeah, that was one of the first big decisions I made. It was like, okay, professional decisions. It was like, before then it was just, okay, no huge decisions made. But then it was like, okay, you're going to just shut this door, you're going to lock it, and you're just going to walk on past and try something else.
I appreciate you sharing that. The self-awareness that you had in that moment is so powerful.
I didn't feel like I had a choice, Ray. It was weird. it was so strange. It was so powerfully felt that it didn't feel like, oh, let's calculate, the return on investment. Let's figure out the odds whether this is a good move or not. Man, economically was not a good move. Professionally was not a good move. But it was clear that was the situation, and there was no other thing to do other than to leave that job.
Sure. Yeah. Good for you. You didn't spiral and hit rock bottom, as they say. Where you're now you're fired because you've had multiple candidate interviews that ultimately led into your boss hearing about it. And now you're in a scenario where you're at rock bottom, where you have this, career that is no longer a career, and you're dealing with, a lot of mental health issues. And so you made the right choice. And what did you do next?
It was again an exploration. So emerging from this world, it was like, okay, great. I'm going to just try and. This is when Web 2 was breaking out. So okay, let's study the social media. Let's see if I can do something else. That was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. So I've never actually had a job since then, such that someone would pay me a salary and I was an employee of a business. So I ceased to become an employee at that point. And I started a string of failed companies. So the first company I started was really, it was probably a training company. I mean, it wasn't even clear what it was. I had this vague idea that, okay, Web 2 is here. That's going to change how people recruit. Maybe how, people, organizations talk about each other and talk about themselves. I'm going to figure how that looks like. And maybe I could just parlay that into some consultancy type of work. That was a terrible business. In the sense that I made zero money for another 18 months. So this was like, oh no, burning all of the reserves I had and getting to the point where, it was like, oh, do I sell my house? That kind of level. Then I realized, okay, don't sell the house. Actually, just look at the business model and reverse that, which I did do. And I ended up working for a load of tech startup businesses. I was fortunate again to live in a part of London that had a lot of these companies setting up. And you just meet people in the supermarket. You'd meet like founders and you'd meet engineers and all this type of stuff. And eventually, they say, hey, we need help to recruit these people. We need to put a plan together to get from 0 to 50 engineers in like 2 months. Do you know anybody who can help? And it was like, okay, listen, I could probably give you some tips. And I ended up doing, what I call, what is called now a head of talent role for a number of early stage funded tech startups. So these were companies typically that had, founder only. The founder raises to $3 million, whatever it is. My job was to come in and to help convert that into 20 core people. And I did that. It was great fun working with a bunch of really cool companies. And yeah, that was to set the stage for the next business, which was, when you're recruiting a lot of engineers, you eventually, some of them actually become your friends, even if you're trying to resist that, but they become your buddies. And it wasn't too long before they end up coming to you and say, hey, Hung, I've got this great idea. I think we should change how recruiting works. What do you think? And I was like, oh no, I don't want to do this. But then I realized actually, the opportunity to actually build something with a bunch of software engineers is actually quite rare. That's actually the hardest thing in startup, to secure people who've got the capability to build. And I said, okay, let's do something. And we launched a tech talent matching platform, which was based on, extracting sentiment from a person, visualizing that into a radar chart and then matching that to appropriate jobs. So what we wanted to do is basically stop the first call, which is, hey, can I ask what you're looking for? Our theory was, look, can we figure out what the person's looking for? And if so, let's just remove that first call. And the only person the candidate needs to speak to is someone that actually has a job they are looking for. Can we do that? and that was great fun to build that product. Another failed business. I mean, I need to say, even though we had ups and downs, we had a great first year. But I was like a super inexperienced tech founder at the time, so I didn't know how to operate a business of that type. And that ultimately was on the downward track. And my attempts to save that business led me to what I'm doing now, which is, okay, as a CEO of a failing tech business, like I was thinking more sales will solves all problems. So I've just got to stuff the top of the funnel with as much people that might be interested in the service as possible. And that's when I started thinking, okay, how can I scale up my communication with that audience? And then I thought, okay, let's do a newsletter, let's do a podcast, let's do more community stuff, let's do all of this thing. And that's how Recruiting Brainfood started. In a way, it was like, okay, let's set up. This goes all the way back to the beginning where we're talking about how it becomes stimulating. As a tech CEO, I was very interested in the content, and I was like curating that content for myself. And I was annoyed that I had to click through so much stuff to get to the stuff that was interesting. And that's when I created this database. And ultimately I thought, okay, how do I share it with people? I share it with the newsletter. And that's when I thought, okay, this might actually be a very good tool to also hustle up some more contacts, increase the network, and hopefully rescue the tech company. Which in the end it didn't. I mean, pretty much a year of doing it, it was pretty clear the community wanted me to do the content and the curation more than the tech service. And truth be told, my passion and interest had moved towards that direction as well. And we just let the tech business go.
Wow. What determination, I have to say, that just going through those failed businesses, the determination that you had to ultimately get to the work that was going to fulfill you. And I wonder, like, when you reflect back from the time that you made that decision to quit that job and sort of go on this journey of one failed business after another, like, how did you have that inner trust in the universe that if I just keep working and pivoting and working and pivoting, that I will ultimately find the thing that I'm called to do? Like, where did that trust come from?
You know what? I don't think it was trust, so to say, Raymond. It was more like it was more like, okay, you're still alive, right? So it's almost, you just got to hang around long enough. Do you know what I mean? It was like, again, using the boxing analogy, it's like if you're still in the ring at round 10, then you're doing okay. You've still got a shot. The idea is not to get knocked out in round 1. So, for me, it was all like, okay, obviously you got a plan of action. Obviously you can do these things, and you're learning as you go. You're making a couple of really good ideas, came close, didn't work. So you learn a bunch from all of the failings, because not every failing was 100% failure. There was actually, 30%, 50% was actually, oh, this worked really well. And then you get better as an entrepreneur, basically, or you get better as someone who is trying to kind of carve your own way. And in the end, you just become a lot more confident in your capability to do it. But now I find myself in a really good and efficient business to run, which I still enjoy, and people seem to value it. And that gives me super motivation. So very blessed to have reached this point. But I took those failures to get here, 100%.
Yeah. Well, I wrote down this word confidence that you said a couple of times here. And what came to mind for me, though, is I have to go back to the word belonging that you mentioned earlier on, when you were sort of navigating the 3 cultures and trying to figure out your identity and who you are. And I think like that journey and that sort of self-discovery that you went on, and then ultimately led to your accident, and that time where you had that clarity of, what you're called to do and who you're called to be, and then being able to find that job in 3 years, like those are all confidence builders and building blocks. And then, working through the failures to get to where you are today, pretty special.
You know what? I thank you for the compliment, Ray. I do. I do need to register that it doesn't necessarily sit well with me, because at the time it didn't feel like confidence, right? At the time, it just felt like, here's a set of circumstances and I've just got to do it. So it wasn't like I was like, it wasn't like I was thinking, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna succeed. It was like, I've got no choice. It's like the circumstances were limited in terms of options. I didn't have a fallback option per se, and that sometimes sharpens the thinking as well. You burn your boats sometimes, and maybe that's necessary so that there isn't a backward path.
Yeah, you always had a plan A. It didn't seem like there was any plan B. You're striving toward the plan A, which you believe at the time this is what I need to do. And you need multiple plan A's, and if plan A fails, just do another plan A. Right. Because if you're running two plans at the same time, typically the backup plan becomes the main plan. And I do think that has some truth to it. I think it's different story when you get to the point where materially you can get away with running like a zillion things because you know what, you can afford to have X amount of them to go away and so on. You're almost operating at that point like an investor. So I make a distinction between those folks that run 16 businesses, quote unquote, run 16 businesses, but actually they don't. They've appointed other people or they've invested in those companies and they just switch in and out. But if you're grinding away and your income is totally dependent on your own effort, I don't think you can run too many things at once because one will distract from the other for sure. So you have you've created this community, you have the newsletter, you're building this business. What's next? Like, you feel like you have more work to be done in terms of creating value for the people that you're inspiring and working with? Like, what other things you're looking to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, people ask me this question quite a lot. Like, what is the plan? And I got to say, Ray, I hate to disappoint the listeners here, but there is no plan, and there kind of never has been. There's just this general sense that I've found myself where I'm doing work which I would describe as ecosystem support. So I see the recruitment industry, the recruitment ecosystem, whether you're an agency recruiter, an in-house recruiter, HR person, a technology provider in that space. I see them all as part of an ecosystem. And they're all sort of, my job is to try and support that ecosystem as best as I can. And that is through through the newsletter, through events, and through whatever means that then kind of emerge going forward. And so my plan is to continue doing that so long as that's required or wanted. We're in recruitment. We're in the middle of a very fascinating period. The world of work is changing. We've got tremendous existential questions about function. The shape of companies is changing. The entrance of artificial intelligence fundamentally presents challenge and opportunity to what recruiters are and do. And so I feel like pretty much I've got to be staying within this community and supporting it all the way through these enormous challenges, and hopefully we can reap some of the reward from some of the opportunities that emerge from it as well.
Yeah. I love it. I love that you're not searching for anything, and this idea of no plan. I think that speaks volumes because it says you're thriving in the work that you're doing today. You're creating value for yourself. You're creating value for others. You're fulfilled in the work that you're doing, and you're living your dream. And this idea that you're not searching for anything and you're just living for today. I think that says a lot.
It's not something that I would recommend for others. I mean, I think some people are very strategic. I've got a friend of mine who basically is an expert at, which she calls it, shaping her life. She's got like 10-year plan, and this is not just professional. This is like everything, right? She wants 2 kids. She wants this, and that. She nails it every time. She project manage her life. Brilliant. I don't have that skill set or that mentality, and I don't think I've got a better life than her. I think she's doing better than me. But you got to go with who you are, right?
Right.
And for me, I prefer to just explore and to push where it's interesting. And I find that sort of things emerge that suit me if I do that. When I try and draw a plan out and say, I'm trying to do this, it inevitably falls on its ass. So for me, my approach is best by just leaning into where I think I'm needed most, doing it externally, like pushing externally and gathering information, and then stuff emerges that's interesting and cool. So keep doing that for me, and it's working out okay so far.
That's great. Well, listen, I so appreciate your authenticity, your vulnerability. I have really appreciated our conversation today. I appreciate you sharing your upbringing, some of the struggles that you had in your early childhood, sharing your accident, what ultimately led to the career that you're in. And I believe our conversation today is going to relate to a lot of people who maybe don't have a life plan, but they're just trying to figure out what they're going to do tomorrow. And your message says there is no tomorrow.
There is no tomorrow, and there is no plan. And maybe if I can inspire any of those folks, then that would be it. It's like, plans are great, but have a North Star, have a general idea, direction of travel. But yeah, I haven't spec'd it out, man. It's like, okay, just get to where there's lots of connections, lots of information, something's going to emerge.
Well, we're going to share your information in our show notes so people can find you and your newsletter and all the great work that you're doing. Hung, thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy, and I really appreciate you just being present in this conversation. And we're really grateful for the time that you shared today.
Great conversation, Raymond. Thank you so much for your time and brilliant conversation. Loved it.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for listening. Until next time. Hi everyone, it's Raymond again here. I want to take a moment and say a special thanks to our sponsor, Career Minds. They're a global provider of workforce solutions. And if you like what you're hearing on the show, we'd love for you to take a moment and click follow on your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, please leave us a rating or review. It really helps new listeners find the show. And you can also watch the full episode on YouTube. Just search for Clocking Out with Raymond Lee and hit subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to check out our episode polls and drop us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Finally, if you or someone you know has a story that they want to share about navigating change, taking a risk, or rethinking their career, we want to hear from you. Head to the link in our show notes and fill out the form to be considered for a future episode. Until next time, remember, if you're sitting there and you're just stuck or unsure of your career or future, and you think it's time for a change, I would encourage you to ask these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? Am I doing the things that matter to me most? And am I creating value for myself and for others? Until next time.